Is that mic on?
Yes.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
All right. Can you just say your first and last name for us, please?
Adrienne Southworth.
And then spell both of that for us, please.
ADRIENNE
And who are you here representing today?
I'm representing Tina Burnell here. We're in the case, sounds like a courtroom, 25 CI 6049.
So just give us a quick background of what was today's proceeding about and what came out of it today.
Sure. Metro Council has filed a complaint against Tina Burnell relating to an executive session, disclosures, and they have like 3 different stages to this process. This was addressing the first stage and whether we're going to kind of pause and figure out all of the materials, get all of the information together in front of the judge, because the judge hasn't really seen much of anything, if anything at all, about what the issues really are. So it's at a very early stage, but Metro Council obviously wants to figure out how to get everything on pause so that then they have time to bring up what they want to in front of the judge in an organized manner.
As far as the injunction or restraining order he was mentioning today in regards to social media, what was that about and what's been posted on social media so far?
So the judge doesn't know, and none of us even discussed like what has been posted on social media or anything, so that's kind of his whole point. If there's an actual privileged communication at Metro government, which he can't say or not say right now because it's too early, he doesn't have all the information. But if there was, then he would want it to be kept safe and not discussed until we can get it figured out, sorted out if it was or wasn't. So what he was saying today was, okay, let's nobody talk about this until we can get it fully briefed. So we'll be back in 2 weeks to actually go through those things step by step.
And are you representing your client through the entire lawsuit as well, or is this just for this special?
Yeah, I'll
case
be
hearing?
continuing it.
Anything you would like people to know about this case? I know the judge said, you know, he doesn't need to get into the details just yet, but what do you think the public needs to know about this and why this is important?
Well, it's super important because obviously the public has the right to know what's going on with their government, right? Because the government is of, by, and for the people. So the public can always attend meetings whenever the government entities are meeting. There are certain exceptions. Also, the public always has access to records. We call it open records. Some states call it sunshine laws, that kind of thing. Anything that's going on, we always have a right to get as the public. But there are exceptions, just like every good rule. And so one of the exceptions is if there is a, lawsuit settlement, or if there is a, somebody's private information that's not actually related to the public, there are reasons why we would exempt certain things from those disclosures. So that's really what the issue is here. Now, what often happens is public entities get kind of loosey-goosey and they start, saying, hey, we're gonna have a meeting about X, and then they turn around, it starts turning into a whole bunch of more stuff that's not really why they said, and public entities have to hold themselves very accountable to themselves, because if they're having a private meeting and nobody's there to watch it, well then how in the world do we address issues when they start rambling on about other things? So it's really interesting section of law that sort of overlaps, where you have public disclosure interests and then, actual exemptions. And people need to know what's going on, and there's no way they're gonna know unless someone tells them or they figured out themselves. But, well, if you can't go to the meeting, how would you know? So it's where certain things can happen. If somebody knows it happened, they can report it to the appropriate authorities and get it sorted out. So I think that's kind of, we're probably on the very front edge of that.
So were there things happening in meetings that should have been public?
That is the complaint that the Metro Council is making about saying, hey, you can't be talking about stuff that happened because it was all just fine. And then, of course, our position is, well, if it wasn't, then you shouldn't have been doing it. So that's going to be what we're going to have to bring to the court.
You said in 2 weeks you're coming back. What date is that?
August 20th at noon. There'll be a hearing here, maybe a little bit similar to today, except for the judge will actually have more full information.
Understood. That's really all I have.
I guess for people maybe trying to understand the greater public, what is this impact to them? What would you like them to know, and what would you like them to know?
Well, specifically, there is stuff going on in closed meetings, which the judge just said we're not going to talk about. So we are not going to talk about exactly what happens in closed meetings in this particular closed meeting right now, but we are going to be talking about it, and so I feel like it's kind of hard for me to right now because of what the judge just said. Let's not talk about the details. I want to see the details because obviously I think it's important, but I'm not the person who decides on those details. That's other people, and it's not this judge exactly. There's other judges, other processes for that. So, you know, those processes will have to play out. And people just generally need to know what's going on with their government. That's the whole crux of this whole thing. And if people think something's going on and then something else is actually going on, you know, that is what matters. Now, I'll give you examples not from this case, but from other cases. One of the biggest stories in public corruption in history in Kentucky is Bop Trot, 1990s, early 1990s. Before there were even ethics rules at the state level, legislators were caught. It was a 3.5-year investigation by the FBI and the federal prosecution team. They were wiring people. They were seeing who was willing to take money for votes, okay? Those kinds of things, you hear about them, these big, exciting stories. We don't always have a big, exciting story every time, but when people find out senators are coming off of the floor, taken out by police, that makes the news. And you have to wonder what was going on. Well, what was going on was over 3.5 years just of the investigation, not including of the activity prior to that, right? And that was so instrumental in our whole entire concept now of ethics, because the state then after that said, oh my goodness, like we have to do something because we look terrible. And so they actually implemented the first ethics laws before. It sounds crazy because it's only been a few decades ago, but before there were no ethics laws. It was, you know, lobbyists come up and say, you know, which girls would you like? Which drinks would you like? That was legit what was going on. And we think that sounds terrible. It does, but just think like 50 years ago, that was the norm. And so only 30 years ago, they said, oh, by the way, we shouldn't just take money and promise votes and promise, you know, women and promise, you know, like that's not okay. So that's a big one that everybody thinks of when it comes to public corruption stories in Kentucky. And so I think that, you know, on a smaller scale, you see that kind of stuff happening all the time. And especially as a public servant, public servants, it's so hard because it's not like the private where you can just make your own decisions. You always have this whole like cloud behind you wondering, you know, is this actually in the public interest? One thing they'll tell you in ethics training now that we have ethics laws, you don't actually follow what your manager says to do, just like you would your boss in a private entity. You do follow it unless it violates the public trust, unless it's against the public interest. Then you have a higher authority, and that is the public that you serve. So it's a really interesting situation, and a lot of people, especially newer people in public interest work or public, as new public servants, can make serious mistakes very easily because they just aren't aware enough of all those ethics implications and how to properly represent the public and not getting stuck in their own little funnel.
I think that's it for me.
Remind me of your name one more time.
Adrienne Southworth.
Could you spell that for me?
Adrienne Southworth, Southworth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've got plenty of options.
Thank you. Take your time.
Why is everybody like? Why
Hey
is
y'all,
the
I'm
police
Attica
fighting
Scott,
against
former
us?
Kentucky representative, joining me today on State Last Night.
We will continue to provide updates as we have more information.
Former Kentucky State Representative, and you're joining me today on State Last Night.